Hey everyone, welcome back to Master Your Life Beyond the Founder. I'm your host, Luke Beestall, and in our studio today, I have a fellow UK guest with us, Isaac, joining us from St. Albans City, and I am so excited to have this conversation with him today, just because, well, first of all, he's completely shifted his life, but I think what you're going to hear today is probably one of the most vulnerable but depth stories that we've had on this show, this is the reason why I'm really excited for this. Now, he was an actor and that changed. He went into prison and now he's doing coaching, specifically logos coaching, which I will let him explain in a minute. But I think this journey and this story is what's going to grip us as listeners and add a lot of value to myself and you that's listening today. So first of all, Isaac, I just want to give you a big warm welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Luke. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me here today. It means a lot.
No, it's right back at you. You know, it's a pleasure to have somebody that, you know, I mean, obviously reading your form, like I say, I read every application and just the depth that you went to. And obviously we're going to go deep today because you said that obviously a lot of conversations can just be surface level. You want to go below the surface. But just for anyone sort of coming into this episode, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and, yeah, what sort of coaching, because we know there's a lot of coaches out there, what sort of style of coaching and what it is that you do.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the founder of Logos Coaching, and the type of coaching I do is what I call meaning-based coaching. So like you said, there's a variety of different types of coaching. There's a lot of performance-based coaching, which focuses on, you know, how can we optimize and how can we get better at, you know, doing a certain thing that we're doing. The questions that I like to ask when I'm coaching is that really the thing that you want? You know, what really means the most to you? And we do something called meaning mapping, which is about having a look at all the different areas in your life and figuring out, you know, is this thing that I'm trying to optimize and perform in, is that the thing that really means the most to me? Is it the thing where I feel most alive or I feel most lit up? Because, you know, sometimes people, they're not lost because, you know, the thing that they're doing, they're not doing it right. Sometimes they're lost because the thing that they're doing is not the thing that they really love or the thing that they really care about. So it's a discovery process and it's about figuring that out. And I've developed a lot of IP and a lot of things that have come from some of my experiences when everything got stripped away and I had to figure that out for myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, obviously, you'll probably understand this, and just for people listening, that a lot of what we create comes through our own experiences, right? And it's knowing that there's probably people out there that would benefit from it. You see it as like it's changed your life so that you want to then give back to others. So I'd love to know from your meaning-based coaching, where did that begin? When did that start to come to light?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first time that I started to think about meaning was I would say around, it was a good little while ago now. It was a good little while ago. And, you know, I was about to be sentenced for importation of psychedelics. And actually, we'll go back a little bit before that. So I was arrested about 2 years before and I was released under investigation. And for those that don't know, when you're released under investigation, it essentially means you're going to court at some point for this thing that you've been arrested for. I didn't know if that was going to be 3 months. I didn't know if it was going to be a year. A year went by, 18 months went by. And then, you know, I'm coming up to this 2-year mark and I'm thinking, you know, this is importation of Class A drugs, essentially. So, you know, I could be getting 12, 16 years, maybe even more, depending on the way that they see it. And I started to think, well, you know, okay, so everything that I love, everything I care about is going to be taken away. So where's the meaning in this? Like, what's going to be the point? So I started studying meaning. I started to look into, you know, existentially and you know, okay, so how do we find the things that mean the most to us, especially when a lot of the things that we thought did get taken away from us? Then if we fast forward a little bit, I find myself in prison. And there's an amazing coaching organization that do coaching in prisons. And they're called Spark Inside. They're a beautiful organization. And I went on something called the Hero's Journey, which is a 6-week course that prisoners go on. And on one of those days, one of those coaches asked me, they said, if you could do anything and give anything to the world, what would it be? And I went back to my cell that day and I started to think about it. And I started to think about these amazing coaches that had sat down with these people that were lost in a place where they felt like they had no meaning in their lives, and asked them these questions that sparked an idea and a belief and a thought. And I thought, this is what I want to do. Like, that is what I want to do. That is what I want to bring to the world. So I spent the next many years of my life that being my mission and that being my obsession. Yeah.
So this is good, Isaac. But why coaching?
The beautiful thing about coaching is that it says to us that people don't need fixing. People need someone to sit and to listen and to give them enough space to be able to figure out what it is that they really want in their life. And that's why coaching is such a beautiful thing. You know, there's a big difference between mentoring and therapy and coaching. But coaching in this way, with these particular models, that is what they do for people. And it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think I like that, and it's obviously it's very clear just hearing you share that, Isaac, that it obviously has meaning, number one, but it's got that sort of drive behind it. You can tell that this is the thing. It's sort of like, wow, you know, if you've been in that environment and you go straight back to your cell, which, you know, I mean, I don't know what it was like in your environment, but it can be quite an isolating, dark place. Not much there, like I say, everything's stripped away from you, but you've still got that desire to think and decide on what it is that you really, really want. Now, obviously, there's a lot there. What you shared, obviously, you know, the meaning-based coaching, which I think is brilliant. We'll sort of go into that journey, but I think I want to ask you this question because it really came up for me when you'd spoken about that sort of released upon investigation, where that you had this, you didn't know whether it was 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, but it ended up being, what did you do in that time? Like, what was because it's like a bit of a ticking time bomb of like, my life's not over, but I'm going into this enclosed environment.
Yeah, well, in that time, I was not in a good place, you know, mentally, emotionally. In some ways, I actually found that I had a better mental health when I was actually in prison, because that limbo of, you know, because once something happens, you're like, okay, now I can deal with it, right? Now I'm in this situation. Now I can make decisions. I have a bit of my autonomy back now. Now I can work towards something better. But when you're in this limbo stage and you're like, you know, I can't start anything new. I can't, you know, even my relationships and the people in my life, like, is there any point, you know? And it was this kind of like existential thought of like this almost like a nihilistic way of thinking, like, what's the point in anything, you know? What would be the point in me doing anything right now? So the only thing that I could really hold on to during that time is figuring out what the point is in everything, you know, and in life in general, and in challenges, and in, you know, all these different things. So I essentially had a 2-year existential crisis, you know, where I was trying to figure out, like, what's the point in everything? You know, where's all this going? And, you know, in regards to the fact that a large part of everything I was doing was actually to try and help people, you know, where's the meaning here? Like, where's the justice, you know, in this criminal justice system that I'm now like been swept up in? And I just, during that time, I started to discover a lot about myself and about life, which was a really fortunate and unfortunate time for me, because it was unfortunate in the fact that, you know, I was going through that and I was released under investigation, but it also allowed me to prepare for going to prison, you know, prepare for those situations that I was going to encounter and those challenges. So, yeah, in some ways a gift, but also not fun.
Yeah. Well, obviously, upon hindsight and reflection, I guess you look at sort of the positives of that time there. But I guess then in that period, could you work? Could you do anything to earn a bit of money? What was life like also with that period?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was released under investigation, so I wasn't even on bail. So, you know, from the court's point of view, I could have gone on holiday, I could have got a job,
Mad.
I could have done any of those things, right? So obviously it crossed my mind a couple of times. I'll just bounce to Mexico, like,
Yeah.
But then, at the same time, I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, I need to face this either way. I need to, and I think what would happen is I was in between a rock and a hard place because 3 months go by, and then you think, oh well, I could have started something new during that time, but what if it's next month? And then another 3 months goes by, and you think, oh, it's been 6 months now. There's so much I could have done, but and it just carried on like that until I got to about maybe a year and a half in, and by that time I had like created I'd started a few little projects and created a few little things, but they were more like schools of thought and ways of like, if this dropped right now, that would be okay, but yeah, I couldn't start any businesses, which for someone like me as well, who is someone that has about 300 business ideas a day, it was really difficult for me to like be in that place, but it also taught me as well that that stillness and that silence and that moment to pause can change everything for you. It can really help you to grow as a person. So yeah, that was another understanding. But during that time, and during this research, I came across something by a guy called Eric Edmeades, and it's funny you talk about hindsight. I can look back at this now and I can be almost in some weird way a bit grateful for it. Well, he talks about this thing called the hindsight window, and he says that the hindsight window is this window of time between, like you say, when something really bad happens to the point in the future that you can look back at it and be in some weird way kind of grateful for it, right? And he says that if you can close this hindsight window, so rather than 2 years later looking back and going, oh yeah, that's kind of a gift, being able to do it a week later or maybe even at the time, then you can create this psychological and emotional well-being, right? So I start to understand this, and then I get sentenced, and then I find myself in the back of a prison van, right? And I'm on my way to prison, and I'm like, all right, the hindsight window, let's play this game, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm starting to think, okay, right, I'm on my way to prison. I've just been sentenced. I've just been released on 2 years under investigation. How is this going to be a good thing? How in 2 years, in 5 years, am I going to look back at this and be grateful for this moment? And obviously to start with, I was like, no, this isn't a good thing. There's nothing good about this, right? But yeah, as I was, sitting in that hot box, I started to think, oh, hey, well, I heard that you can get your degree in prison, and I'll be able to go to the gym and I'll be able to work out every day, which I've wanted to do for a long time and I haven't had the time. Oh, and also I'll be able to read loads of books. I'll be able to learn loads about myself. I'll be able to socialize and engage with things that I wouldn't normally. And I'm not kidding you, by the time I got to that prison, I had so many reasons why it was going to be the most transformative and important time of my life, and it was going to help me to grow, because I closed my hindsight window. And I carried that with me through that time. And I carried that through. And the beautiful thing about it was that ripple effect of that started to affect other people around me. Because you stick out like a sore thumb when you're in prison and you kind of look happy. People come up to you, they say, dude, like, why are you happy? Like, what's that all about? And I'd say, oh, well, I do this thing. So yeah, I think that, like I say, that time being released under investigation was a gift, because it allowed me to understand things and prepare for that situation. And now I can look back and really see it as a gift, but maybe not at the time though. Not at the time.
Well, no, but I heard this from a guest that I've spoken to, actually, Isaac, and he said every challenge is a gift. Even if you don't see it in the moment, every challenge is a gift. Obviously, this was sort of a challenge for you. And I think, yeah, absolutely. I was listening there and probably thinking, hold on a minute, this guy's gone to prison and he's smiling, he's happy. And, where's this even come from? But I think, obviously, you've done a lot of work sort of on yourself. You took this as, like you said, an opportunity, and you sort of visioned it as like, this is a transformative part of my life. Obviously, with the prison, what was the hardest thing about it? What was something that sort of took you by surprise, maybe, that you can remember that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think during that time, when I was preparing to go, I was, you watch all these documentaries and they sensationalize everything and they make everything, look a certain way. But I think for me, actually the hardest part about it was hearing other people's stories and seeing other people's struggles, because I mean, for me in my situation, I was going to prison for something that was, maybe a little bit unjust. I was, getting a really small amount of time in comparison to, what a lot of people get for a sentence like that. I was going to come out to, to relationships and family and things, that other people didn't have. So I think sometimes the hardest part of that for me was talking to like the other men in there and hearing their stories and hearing, just how challenging their life had been and how they hadn't been set up for success. Like they hadn't been given the tools that they needed to be able to, get through situations. And some of the ways that these men had dealt with their challenges was remarkable. And some of the things that some of these guys had been through and were continuing to go through and still getting up every day and, working on bettering themselves was incredible. So I would say that was probably one of the hardest and one of the most inspirational parts of that experience, was having those conversations. Yeah, for sure.
Do you love having conversations?
I love having conversations. I always have.
So what do you love most about having conversations?
I love being able to I think that storytelling and sharing is something that for thousands of years we've used to communicate and to inspire each other and to, give each other insights. And I think it's a really, really important thing for us to do, is to sit down with another human being and share, share our moments and our experiences. And because, as we do that, we naturally, as human beings, we compare and we think about our own lives, and then, we might change something, or we might think about something in a different way, or we might, find a new way of communicating ourselves through the way that someone else speaks and articulates himself. So, yeah, I think storytelling and communication and sharing and having conversations is just such a beautiful and important thing to do. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is why we're here today, Isaac. We're here having this conversation, sharing the story, and already what you've just opened up about, I appreciate a lot, because not that, I mean, it very seems like this was sort of a positive experience, but I know a lot of people probably would deem it as, gosh, it must have been the worst experience of your life. I bet you couldn't wait to get out. But you've really sort of done the work and found those transformative pieces. I mean, just to encapsulate the whole sort of prison experience, what would you say that you learnt the most from it? What was the gift for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think firstly, I would say that, prison for me wasn't a positive experience. I made it a positive experience.
Okay.
And I think that for me, that was actually a coping mechanism. People have different coping mechanisms. Some people, they land in prison and they just want to find drugs. Some people, they land in prison and they want to, they just want to sit there and watch TV and just pretend it's not happening. For me, it was, how can I turn this into a good thing? And I think that the biggest gift was, I think it was two things. I think firstly, me realizing that was a coping mechanism, that I'm not some like special guy who like can go into a challenging situation or go into prison and, and deal with it in a good way because I'm, really mentally stable or something. No, it was a defense mechanism. It was a way for me to cope, with that situation. So I think realizing that, humbled me as well. And I think being able to share that with the other men in there as well, they were like, oh, hey, how do you do all these, like, don't you feel like shit all the time? And like, you're in prison. And I'd be like, yeah, for me, it's just a different coping mechanism. This is just the way that I deal with things, and I think the second biggest gift was that experience of coaching, which I don't know if I would have otherwise had I not gone there. coaching's quite expensive. It's, I think a lot of people, they know about therapy, they know about mentoring, they know about really specific niche coaching as well. But yeah, would I have ever? I don't know. And I think that whole experience, the thing that it really taught me was that throughout my life, even from when I was a kid, I've always wanted to help people. I've always wanted to find ways to make the world a better place. But I always did it in a way that, because it's not just about helping people, it's about the way that you help people. And I was always trying to fix everything all the time. I'd see a problem and I try and fix it. I see a person that's going through something and I care about them and I try and fix it, right? That's what we do. That experience taught me that people don't need fixing. People need you to sit in the mud with them and be like, hey, do you know what? I'll sit here with you for as long as it takes you to get out. And that's all people need. That's all people need. And I realized that in doing that, actually, you end up propelling someone forward into the next version of their greatness. Because when you try and fix them, the problem is if you have a challenging situation right now and I say to you, oh, hey, here's my advice. If it goes right for you, then I get all the glory. And if it goes wrong for you, well, then I get blamed, right? But whereas if I sit there and I allow you to come to your own insights and I sit in the mud with you and I say, hey, I'm not going to tell you whether that's a good idea or not. I'm just going to be here with you, because I care about you. And then you go and do the thing. Then you get all the glory. You have your own autonomy back. You're empowered. And I'm still there by your side, whether it's going bad or it's going good. And that's what real care is. That's what real love is. And I think that that's what we need more in this world. And that's what that experience taught me. It taught me that, I don't need to walk around trying to put out fires and jump in front of buses all day. Instead, I just need to figure out, what does it really mean to care for someone? Because if that's what you want to do, that's what it looks like, right? So yeah, that experience taught me those things. And I think they're probably some of the most valuable lessons in my life, for sure. Yeah.
Amazingly shared there, Isaac. I really like that. And I think just to sort of reflect this back from what I heard, just so our audience can sort of dial in on this. Look, we think that we probably want to get told what to do, right? We want the solution. However, if we're all honest here, we don't like getting told what to do. Really,
yeah.
we don't like it. We don't like somebody to say do this. So the advice piece, what you just shared there, it's a soft way of telling someone what they should do. But you're right. If it goes right, yes, they don't get the fault. But if it goes wrong, you get the blame. But I think as well, I think what's going to be relevant with our conversation today is obviously it's Men's Mental Health Awareness Week, which I want to ask your sort of, honest thoughts on this. So you said about sitting in the mud, right, with the person and just being there, giving them that space and telling them, I'm here with you, the empathy, the sort of vulnerability. But as guys, we want to do things on our own, we don't want to help with a man. So just for you having that experience in prison, which I'm sure you come across a lot of those guys with I'm the man, I'm the tough nut, I don't need help, I don't need support, I don't need coaching. How did you sort of come up with these not solutions but your way of doing things to help them, especially if they was quite, I don't know, maybe barriers up, guards up, bottling their emotions?
Yeah, and this was something that I experienced a lot in prison, but also with all of my mates as well. We're all the same, right?
Yeah,
no, it's cool, I got it, I'll do it, it's all right. I don't, but I think that, and I think this is a really important thing between men, is that you can I kind of trick my mates sometimes, rather than saying, hey man, tell me about how you feel, right? They're going to be like, nah, leave me alone, man. Instead I say, hey, what's, this thing, how's it going? And they'll say, oh, it's going well, but I kind of got these problems, with it, and it's kind of pissed me off or whatever. And I'll say, okay, tell me more. And they will. And then the next question is, okay, well, how would you like that to be? Oh, well, I'd like it to be like this, but it's still this problem with this other thing, and I'm not sure to how I'm going to get there. Okay, and if there was just like one step that you could take, what would that look like? And then just a pause and a space. It can change everything for someone, because sometimes people, they're wrapped up in that problem, and because of that, it becomes a perpetual cycle. So the person, starts to feel anxious. They start to feel depressed about it. They start to feel like there's no way out, and they start to feel stuck. And sometimes just a simple conversation like that is, tell me more. Let me ask you a couple of questions. These aren't, probing. They're not about your emotions. You don't have to fix anything right now. I'm not going to give you any advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. There's lots of different ways of sitting in the mud with someone. Some people, they need to sit there and they need to cry, and they need you to just be there and not say anything. And other people, they need to figure out the logistics, and they need to figure them out yesterday. So it's just about assessing which one that is, and sitting with them properly, I think.
So it's very clear, Isaac. I think it's so good, especially like you say, there's so many different ways of sitting in the mud, like you say, with people. Like some people just literally don't want you to say one word. They just want to vent. They want to just maybe offset about the partner or something. Maybe they've had a bit of and they just want a man to talk to, because a man might understand a little bit more, even if the man's not saying anything. I think that was so true. And obviously, I've been through many experiences myself. A lot of guests have been through, like male guests, have been through very similar experiences, and it's quite nice to hear your side of things, because I think, I don't want to say this in a way, because obviously, you're great at what you do, but it's a simple message, right? It's not overcomplicated. I think sometimes we really, really just, I don't know, overthink and take on so much, but actually, if you just strip everything away, like going back to what happened with yourself, and just sit, hold space, that could be the answer.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things, is that we live in a world now that is so complicated, so much stimulation. It's like, we're like bombarded with like a billion different things every day. And I think that when you have a really simple problem with probably quite a simple solution, you can't see it. And I think a lot of these things as well is to do, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is about what we pay attention to. And again, it's such a simple thing, but it's so important. I think that our brains pay attention to what we, they notice what we pay attention to. And, if we have these mantras in our head about certain things, there were probably really awful things that happened when I was in prison that I just they didn't even touch my radar, because I wasn't paying attention to those things. I was paying attention to the really human, raw, like beautiful things that were happening, that were allowing growth and change and transformation. Like those were the things that I was drawn to and that I was paying attention to. And sometimes we can have, things in our lives that they're quite easy to pay attention to because they're negative. And we naturally pay attention to negative things. What our brains are designed to do is to protect us, right? So we can be like, oh, okay, don't do that. But I think you can train yourself as to what you pay attention to. And I think it's a really important thing to do, is to think, okay, if I was to write a list of things that I don't want in my life and a list of things that I do want in my life, okay, I'm going to put the list of things that I don't want and throw that one in the bin. And this one, I'm going to recite it as much as I can to try and think about the things that I want to pay attention to. And that's not like, I'm not saying like dive into this like toxic positivity where we're like, pretending that everything's fine all the time. And I don't want to, invalidate anyone's challenges or, because people, we go through difficult things and it's good to name them as well. But I think as well, there are things that we can do that can allow us to not get wrapped up in the unnecessary things that surround those challenges, all the noise and those kind of things as well.
Yeah, I think obviously you've got a wealth of experience, and I think just going back to, and that was really good about sort of the attention, because obviously our attention span, I totally get it, wired to sort of soak up the negativity of the world and talk about moaning and talk about the weather and whatever else we love to moan about. But then, like you say, there is ways that you can, like what you did with your prison experience. Obviously, you could openly say and go, look, it wasn't actually a positive experience, but I created it to be positive. Like you've done some work just for our audience. Maybe they might be in a stage in their life, I'm not saying prison, but maybe a very negative environment, maybe negative workplace where that's all that they're surrounded by. What would you suggest? What would you say to them through your own experiences that helped see or create more of a positive outcome?
Mm-hmm. So I would say there's two things. There's two really important things that were profound for me when I first discovered them. So there's a gentleman called Viktor Frankel, and he was a psychotherapist in the 1930s. And for anyone that doesn't know his story, it's incredible, and you have to read his book. But essentially, he had this idea that meaning in our lives, or the things that are important in our lives, are not something that we find or that we search for. They're something that we create in every moment. So we create the meaning in our lives. Things happen objectively around us, right, that we don't have any control over. Like if it's raining tomorrow, then you can't create those kind of circumstances. But he said that when all of our freedom is taken away, so when something happens out of our control, we only have one thing left, and that's our attitude towards it. That's how we assign meaning to those things. And he had this idea, and then he finds himself on the way to Auschwitz, and he thinks, well, what a better time for me to practice these theories than now, right? And he actually ended up being one of the only people to get out of that camp at the time, and it's an incredible story. And he used this idea of logotherapy while he was there, and I believe that it's something that we can all use. When we have a situation in our life that's challenging, we have something that we think, okay, objectively, this is shit. Like, this is not good right now. The next question should be, okay, but one thing I do have is my ability to assign meaning to it. So, and it could be that hindsight window. It could be, okay, how in 10 years am I going to be grateful for this? It could be, what's the meaning behind this? Like, where does this fit into everything that I know about the world right now? And what can I learn from it? And what is this going to, create for me? And again, sometimes things just are shit, but then it's like, okay, so what about all the other things in my life? Because it's very easy. Sometimes we go a bit like tunnel vision on one thing because it's like a really big deal. It's a really big challenge that we're going through. But then it's like, okay, well, how could I nourish the other areas of my life? How could I, create meaning in other areas of my life that could, maybe make this shit thing not so shit, I guess. So that would be the first thing. I would say the second thing is something that I call paradoxical intention, which is kind of taken from some of these ideas. And it's this idea that if you have something that you're afraid of, or something that you're finding really challenging right now, that you're finding really difficult, the reason that can kind of be perpetuated sometimes is because we go, oh, I really don't like that thing, so I'm going to resist it. So I'm going to try and avoid it. So I'm going to try and not do that thing that I'm afraid of. I'm going to try and, stop that bad thing from happening. And this is a bit unconventional, something that I do with my clients sometimes. But I say do it more. Do it more. Don't avoid it. Don't be resistant to it, because you can't have resistance, anxiety, and fear of something at the same time that you're excited and chasing it and finding it enjoyable. So I think it depends on the challenge. Obviously, if it's something objective that's happening outside of your life, outside of yourself, then, I wouldn't suggest that. If it's something that is maybe a fear that you have, or it's something where you're getting in your own way, I don't know, I've got a fear of speaking, I've got a fear of swimming, I've got I haven't been doing this thing as much as I should. Do it more, and laugh at that fear. Yeah, I found that can be really useful. And actually the psychotherapist that kind of developed some of these ideas, it came from the fact that he had some patients that had insomnia, so they couldn't sleep, right, for like almost a week, like to the point where they were going to die, like really bad, insomnia. And they'd had all these sleep doctors telling them, okay, you need to sleep more, here's the pills, here's the other thing. And he said, no, what I want you to do is for the next 48 hours, I want you to try your best to not sleep. And in fact, if you sleep, you failed, is what he said to them. And they came back 24 hours later, they said, I had the best night's sleep of my life. Because once you remove the fear, the resistance of the thing, then suddenly you can no longer get in your own way. So I would say those are the two things that, if you're facing challenge, can be helpful for some people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know I've sort of asked quite a broad question, and I know it's hard to specifically get to sort of an answer, but I think just that last bit there, what you shared, Isaac, really struck me in a way where it was that resistance piece on sort of like not do the complete opposite, but like that sleep thing where it's like they're not sleeping, and it's like, right, I don't want you to sleep. So, and we are really good at getting in our own way, right? There's a lot of thoughts that go through our mind. There's a lot of self-limiting beliefs that go on. But I think just what you shared there, obviously, I know you've got methods and stuff like that, but it's very clear as well that you've obviously had somebody to look up to, right? So you talk about Viktor Frankl, you come across him, he's been a bit of a guide in a way, I guess. He's like inspired you. And I think that's just a few, I don't know, maybe baby steps for our audience to look in at, to sort of look at the positives, because obviously you're quite developed now, and for a lot of people, they might be there, they might not be there, they might never have exposed themselves to any sort of positivity. Then maybe just starting listening to things such as this platform, like a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that anyone who's listening who is in that place, where you're just dipping your toe in the water, I would say that's probably, because we talk about, someone does this like really amazing thing, or this really transformative thing, and they're so courageous and great, and that's really awesome. But actually, that first step is the hardest one, and that is the one that takes probably the most courage, actually. So I would say that to anyone who is in that kind of space and is starting to take those first steps into feeling better, or into that better life, then I applaud you, because it takes a lot of courage to do that, for sure.
Yeah, totally. And just now onto that, then what's been the hardest step that you've had to make in your life?
The hardest one, I think for me in particular, it was going back to allowing myself to be seen again. Was one of the hardest steps for me, and it's something that I'm still learning, actually. Because I like I said, I trained as an actor. I was on stages. I was in front of cameras all the time. I was extrovert. I was a bit in your face. I was one of those kind of guys when I was growing up and like in my early 20s, and then somewhere along the line, I started to feel like uncomfortable. Like it was confronting, to like 5-10 years ago, being on a podcast like this, you would have never caught me anywhere like this at all. And, I kind of became very, not just introvert, I became like recluse almost. And when I came out of prison, it was again this thing we're talking about of like, before that I could be recluse. But then when they said to me, oh, now you have to be isolated, I was like, wait a minute, I don't want to be isolated anymore, So then when I came out of prison, it was like, okay, now I've got some freedom to not have to feel isolated, to not have to feel like, I can't, share who I am and be seen and be heard. It was a scary process of, like starting to share my story with the world, but not just that, because when I share things, it's not about a performance like it was when I was an actor. I could hide behind the character then. Now it's about me talking about me, which is quite a vulnerable thing to do. But one thing that's really helped me with that is being able to, rather than think about if I should do it, to think about why I should do it. Because I think that there's a big difference between validation and contribution, right? So I think when I first thought about it, I was like, oh, what are people going to think of me? Should I, like, how many likes, or whatever you think. But then I started asking a different question. I was like, okay, well, how can I contribute here? How can I provide value? How is this going to be useful for someone? Is there going to be someone out there that feels like I did all those years ago, and was sitting there like feeling like a recluse, like introverted, didn't want to share anything to anyone about anything, and just listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos and just hoping that something will reach me. Maybe I can be that for someone else. Maybe I can be that Viktor Frankl, that Eric Edmeades, or one of those people that inspired me and allowed me to turn that corner. But that was really challenging. To be like, this is me.
Yeah, totally. And I think hats off to you, Isaac, for being vulnerable, but also, I guess, being vulnerable in a totally different light from, like you said, it was a performance before. Because, like you say, you could hide behind a character. You could be this person in the limelight. But then, like you say, you was more, because you had the experience of being in prison, and obviously you got this drive to become a coach and want to contribute to the world. But then it was like, oh, hold on a minute. I need to be seen, or I need to put myself out there in order for people to know what I do and where I've been, and share my journey, share my story, which, that takes balls to do that. And those feelings that you shared there, the fears of that is something that even I feel today with what I do, like things such as, we could talk about things like, in business, right? Imposter syndrome, feeling like, oh, they've got more experience than me, so they're better than me. And they're putting that out, and I've got a similar view, but in a different way, and I don't want to do that. But you've obviously worked that through and switched it from the like you said, the validation sort of aspect to it being more contribution. And just from that, then, just asking from you actually putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, what's been the biggest shift for you by doing that?
I think that, when I get people now that come to me and they're like, oh, I read your blog, or, after that coaching session, or, just from a chat that I had with you that day, like I went away and I changed something and it's changed everything for me. I think that's changed everything for me, because suddenly now it's not just about me figuring out how I can provide value. It's the fact that, I am. And now I feel like I'm contributing in a way that, because even if just one person listens to something or sees something or reads something and goes, oh, okay, and they make a change, it was all worth it. So, and the fact that I've started to to have that feedback now and those responses, it just makes me feel like I want to do more.
Fantastic. But you are value, Isaac. You are value in what it is. You said earlier on in the show about the storytelling, and that there needs to be more stories. Like, that's how we connected as human beings, right? But that's what you've now pushed past, and the coaching's allowed you to sort of open up about your story, and then allow you to actually go, what you've just said there, by you sharing your stories, brought people, it's like magnetized them towards you to go, hey, man, that struck me, that was relatable. That was something that I've been through myself. Thank you for sharing that. And then, like I say, the conversation, because you love conversations, you've then realized, actually, wow, I'm not having to validate my story here. I'm actually, by sharing it, I'm actually contributing to the world. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, is it's not about us, it's about others, And if everyone in the world was just a little bit more like that in some way, I feel like the world would be a better place, and I do truly believe that, and not in a way of like, oh, we should do everything for everyone else and not for us, not for ourselves. I mean that, like, there's this idea that a lot of anxiety and depression and sadness in the world, it comes from us either feeling like we're not enough, or like we don't have enough, or like the things that we want in the world are not, manifesting in the way that we want them to. And there's this idea of de-reflection, which is that, when we look outside of ourselves, of rather than how can I get the things that I want or be the person that I want, how can I become the person that can contribute to the world in a way that is truly meaningful, then it can change everything. Because what we're all really searching for is a sense of belonging. And when we contribute in a way that's meaningful, we get that sense of belonging, in one way or another. And when we get that sense of belonging, then all of those internal things, am I good enough? Is the outside world, like, all those things, they start to disappear, because you feel like you're contributing something really meaningful, and you're showing up in a way that really means something to other people. So yeah.
I think that's a really good bit though that you shared there. A lot to do with the identity, I guess, of who it is that you need to become or want to become, so that you can give that sort of back to the world. I think we sort of get lost in the how and the sort of how can I take, and I think just what you said there about the world, you want more people, for it to be about more of a collaborative, maybe community teamwork sort of feel, rather than it being sort of the selfish, lonely sort of, I'll do it, take on the world on my own. So sort of, I'd love to know now then, with obviously Logos coaching, what's the ultimate dream for you then with your coaching?
I mean, the ultimate dream is to the mission statement is to bring meaning to a billion people.
Oh, yeah. Right. Wow.
So yeah, I mean, obviously it started off in a prison cell. But yeah, I mean, with everything that we're creating now, it's about one-to-one coaching. It's about bringing coaching to people that can't afford coaching as well. So we're kind of in the process of looking at, some kind of foundation that partners brand new coaches with, people that maybe need coaching, but they can't afford it at the price that it's at. And then we're also doing culture coaching workshops as well in prisons and in organizations as well. And we hope to bring that to a variety of organizations, so that people can feel more like people in the workplace, can feel more human, can feel more, in touch with that culture and that community. And then we've got a load of projects as well. So we've got Project Failure, which is about how can we fail and experiment more in order to grow. Project People, which is about, how, like you said, how can we collaborate more? How can we, and throughout all these things, we bring that meaning-based coaching methodology into that as well, to try and kind of weave that into as many places as possible. How can we bring that into every home? How can we bring that into every organization, and hopefully at some point into governments and into legislation, where it gets taught in schools, where it starts to be thought about, in the criminal justice system and throughout, every way that we live our lives. So yeah, it's a big vision, but I've never really been a small vision kind of guy. So
no, not if you've got 300 business ideas on the go. But no, I think it's great that you've obviously got that ambition, though, Isaac. Obviously, it's a massive goal. I think impossible goals. I've got a fly in this room here. It's doing me head in. But so that's obviously your business sort of mission statement, which I think is brilliant. What's next for you, Isaac? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, so for me, I'm a coach and I'm a founder, and like you say, all the business stuff. But like I said, I've been, 6 months ago, you would have never found me on a podcast, and I've, paradoxical intention. I was like, right, so how many different things can I speak on? Right. So I've done loads of things over the past 6 months. And for me now, I think that, the next step is about me thinking about, okay, how can I do more of this? How can I have more conversations? How can I start speaking, So yes, I'm in talks with agents now about, speaking on stage and doing lots of other things. So so I think that's the next stage for me, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, I think it seems to be that whatever you put your mind to and focus on, it's happened in one way or another, because there's not just one way of sort of getting what you want, right? There's so many different ways, and obviously, like you said, you want to reach 1 billion people, or you want to help 1 billion people find meaning. And I think probably hitting that impact of global on stage, it's gonna rack those numbers up to have that impact that you ultimately want to give.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I think that the more that we can share these ideas with people, and the more that people can realize that they have a lot more control over their life than they think in terms of their outlook. I think that cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about this idea of tolerance and intolerance to uncertainty, and I think the more people that we can reach and show them that you can assign meaning to things in your life, it doesn't just have meaning. You can assign the meaning that you want. Then we can become a bit more tolerant to uncertainty, because we know that, oh hey, even if that is uncertain, even when I get there, even if it doesn't turn out right, I always have the ability to assign meaning to it in whatever way that I want to. So hopefully we can share that to as many people as possible.
I think you're definitely on the way. I think that's for sure. 100% with what you've developed and where things are heading, even what you've sort of shared, with us today. I mean, just as we sort of, well, it's crazy, we're actually sort of getting towards the end of this episode. For our audience sort of listening in now, or maybe they've come halfway through or at the beginning, what's the message that you want them to leave with, so that they can sort of, hopefully, sort of inject into their life?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and a really difficult one. I guess the message that I would leave anyone with that's listening today would be that, regardless of what's going on in your life right now, how challenging it is, how easy it is, one of the most important things that we have is our ability to stay curious in difficult situations. And in doing so, you always have the power to assign your own meaning to any situation, whatever it is. And that can create some really beautiful psychological and emotional well-being in moments that you wouldn't expect. So, yeah.
Stay curious. I like it, but I like the way you sort of explain that as well. I think it's very easy to sort of let emotion sort of take over and sort of close the mind rather than opening the mind when obviously it's a challenging situation, or an easy situation. So I'd love to know now, because I'm curious, with regards to mastering your life. That's a question that I like to ask every guest. So, Isaac, what does mastering your life mean to you?
I think that when we talk about mastery, we talk about optimization and productivity and doing all these things that are going to make you 10x where you are right now. And the other side of it is talking about that 1%. Those small little changes every day that seem innocuous and useless and in no way feel like they're going to benefit you, but over time they do. I don't think that's a physical thing. I think that's something that we do emotionally and mentally with ourselves. I think if every day you can assign meaning to 1% of your life, just one small, tiny little thing, and you do that every day and you do that consistently with intention, then you can find yourself in a place in not too long where your whole life feels and looks different to you. And when you're in that situation, that's when you have the opportunity to really optimize, to really 10x and performance and all those other things that we talk about, but I would say do that first. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I think it's a really good way, and yeah, there's so many like terms and words flown around, but I think doing that first would make a big difference. Well, look, I mean, Isaac, it's been amazing, obviously, to have you on the show and just sort of share your story in a bit of a deeper way. Look, if anyone's sort of here wanting to connect with you and follow your journey and your work and your coaching that you do, where is the best place that they can find you, or even maybe reach out and start a conversation?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn most of the time. So yeah, so you can reach me on there. You can see some of the stuff that I'm doing, and all the stuff that we're doing at Logos as well. And then we have a website as well, which has details about everything we do. There's a world of blogs on there. I'm also developing something called the Human Development Library as well, which is going to be a free resource. It's hopefully coming out in September. But yeah, and anyone can get in contact with me and have a free 30-minute, what I call meaning conversation, which is not one of those things where they say that and then I try and sell you something. It is literally just an opportunity for you to sit down and have a chat with me for 20 minutes, half an hour, about all the things in your life and which ones mean the most to you, so that we can, just have a chat. Kind of like this one.
And sit in the mud.
And I'll sit in the mud with you for 20 minutes. Yeah, exactly.
No, brilliant. Well, look, I really appreciate that offering as well. And look, I'll make sure, Isaac, that, the links are clickable in the show notes, so it's easy for our sort of audience to sort of see where you're at. And like I say, I think it would definitely be worth having a meaningful conversation with you based on what you've shared today. So final thing from me, thank you so much for this time that you've invested today. And yeah, I look forward to the episode coming out. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you. I really appreciate you holding this space for me. Cheers.